I thought I had it all, the luxury, the perfect husband, the dream life. But one shocking night, my billionaire husband, Roland, kicked me out while I was pregnant with his child. I had nothing, no home, no family, and no support. I thought I'd lost everything. But Roland never expected what would happen next. The tables turned, and he was the one begging for my forgiveness, on his knees. This is my story, and it will change everything you think you know about love and power. My name is Lina, and I was once living a dream. Or at least that's how I thought of it. I married Roland, the billionaire who had everything: charm, power, wealth, and a reputation that made him untouchable. I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. He swept me off my feet when I was just 24, and by 25, I had everything I ever dreamed of. A lavish penthouse overlooking the city, private jets, designer wardrobes, and the kind of life most people only fantasize about. It was perfect. I was perfect. At least I thought I was. But no one told me how fragile perfection was. Roland wasn't just my husband. He was a force of nature. When he walked into a room, it felt like the world stopped. He was handsome in that rugged, mysterious way, with eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. I loved him more than I cared to admit. I admired him. I put him on a pedestal, too high, I now know. And it wasn't long before I found myself pregnant with his child. The day I found out, Roland was ecstatic. He lifted me into the air, spinning me around our grand living room like a princess. "We're going to be parents, Lina," he said, his voice filled with pride. He promised me everything, the best of everything for our child, for us. I thought that nothing could touch us, but I was wrong. As the months passed and my belly grew round with life, something in our marriage began to shift. It wasn't sudden, it wasn't even obvious at first, but Roland started to change. He became distant in the way that makes your heart ache, but you don't know why. He was always busy, always working late, and when he was home, he barely looked at me. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, that it was the pressure of being a billionaire, but deep down, I felt it, the coldness, the distance, the silence. And then came the night I'll never forget. I had been feeling sick. Pregnant with our child, I felt nauseous and drained, my emotions a whirlwind of confusion and fear. I had hoped Roland would be there for me, as he always promised he would. But when I came home from a doctor's appointment, something was different. Roland wasn't there to greet me with a hug, like he used to. He wasn't waiting for me with a smile. Instead, I found him standing in the living room, his jaw tight, his eyes hard as stone. "Lina," he said, his voice flat. "We need to talk." I didn't know it then, but that conversation would be the beginning of the end. It didn't happen overnight, but every little thing added up. Roland's gaze, once full of adoration, began to slide off me. The touches I'd once felt in the depths of my soul became fewer and farther apart. I tried to shake off the feeling of rejection, telling myself it was nothing, that I was being oversensitive, that this was just the pregnancy messing with my emotions. But the truth hit me like a cold wave. Roland was slipping away, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. I stared at myself in the mirror one morning, my reflection unfamiliar. My stomach was now with our child, a life growing inside of me, but I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. I was still beautiful, at least I thought I was. My skin was glowing, my eyes still bright with that youthful sparkle. But I didn't feel beautiful. I felt like a stranger in my own body. My curves had changed, my waist thickened, and my breasts had grown heavy with the weight of new life. I tried to tell myself that this was normal. This was what pregnancy was supposed to do to a woman. But when Roland looked at me, or worse, when he didn't, something in me cracked. I watched him, as I always did, from across the room. Roland would look at me from his corner of the sofa, but his gaze wasn't the same. It wasn't the look of longing I had once received. Now, his eyes would dart away the moment they met mine. There was something off in his stare, something I couldn't quite place. I wanted to scream, to demand that he look at me the way he used to, the way he did before I carried our child inside of me. But the words never came. I kept them inside, a secret that I was too afraid to share. And then came the silence. At night, I would lie next to him in bed, the room so quiet I could hear my own breathing. Roland would turn over, his back facing me. I would reach out, wanting to touch him, but my hand would fall back to the cold sheets. and I would pull away in shame. There were no more whispered promises, no more gentle touches. He would kiss my forehead when he left for work, but it wasn't the same kiss. It was a kiss for a friend, not a lover. I was still his wife, still the woman he married, but it felt like I was no longer the woman he wanted. I tried to tell myself it wasn't true, that things were just hard with the pregnancy, that maybe he was just tired, stressed from work. I even convinced myself that I was overthinking things, that once the baby arrived, everything would go back to normal. But deep inside, I knew I was lying to myself. The days grew longer and the distance between us grew wider. I felt it in every moment, the way he would brush past me without touching me, the way he would no longer take my hand in public. The warmth was gone, and I was left standing in the middle of it all, alone. One night, I tried something different. I dressed up in a soft silk nightgown, something I used to wear when we first got married, when I wanted to look desirable. I curled my hair, put on some light makeup, and tried to rekindle the spark. Roland came home late as usual, his face tight with exhaustion. I was sitting on the couch waiting for him, trying to act casual as if nothing was wrong. When he walked in, his eyes met mine, but there was no eyes, no warmth, nothing that made me feel special. "You look comfortable," he said, his voice flat. Comfortable. That word felt like a knife to my chest. I had spent hours getting ready, trying to feel like the woman he used to love. But in that moment, I felt like a ghost. Comfortable. Was that how he saw me now? Just a woman in his house, carrying his child, nothing more? I laughed it off, pretending it didn't hurt. I didn't let him see the pain that bloomed inside of me. But I couldn't stop the tears that came later, alone in the bathroom, staring at my reflection. The tears came from nowhere, as if my body had finally had enough. The woman I was, confident, desired, and in love, was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I thought about everything I had sacrificed to be with Roland. The life I'd left behind, the dreams I'd given up. I thought about the promises we had made to each other, but none of that mattered now. Because the man I married, the man who once made me feel like I was the most important person in his world, was disappearing. And I was afraid that I was disappearing too. The rumors started slowly, just whispers at first, hidden behind polite conversations at parties, quick glances exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. But it didn't take long for them to settle deep inside Roland's mind, twisting their way through every moment, every glance, every conversation. It all started with Clara, a woman who had been my close friend since I met Roland. Clara had always been a part of our lives, coming over for dinner, sharing holidays, the kind of person you trust implicitly. She and Roland even got along better than I had anticipated. But there was always something about her that made me uneasy. I couldn't put my finger on it. Her smile never reached her eyes, and I always felt like there was a little too much lingering in her gaze when she looked at Roland. But I told myself I was imagining things. However, I had no idea that Clara's subtle manipulations had already begun. I didn't know that in the quiet moments when I wasn't around, she was feeding Roland doubts, planting seeds of suspicion about the one thing I thought we were certain of, the baby. When I first noticed the change in Roland, I blamed it on stress. But as the days wore on, and Roland grew more distant, something inside me clicked. Clara had become a frequent guest in our home, always checking in, offering to help, always just a little too available. She'd casually mention things like, "How's the pregnancy going? Is Roland still being distant? It's not easy, you know. I know a woman who went through the same thing, Fata." Or, "It must be tough, Lina, with all that's going on. Pregnancy is a lot, but Roland's a good man. He'll come around." Her words were always sugar-coated, but underneath, I could sense the insinuations. She was subtly putting doubt in Roland's mind, making him question my loyalty, the paternity of the baby, even though nothing about me had changed. The first major crack in Roland's attitude toward me came one morning when he asked, out of nowhere, "How sure are you that the baby is mine?" His question hit me like a slap in the face, my chest tightened, my breath faltering. Roland never asked me questions like that. He had always been sure, hadn't he? My mind raced, the shock, the confusion. Had I heard him wrong? He had to be joking, but when I looked into his eyes, I saw no humor, only coldness. "What do you mean?" I asked. my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, but only for a second, before shrugging and shaking his head as if the words didn't even matter anymore. Nothing, just a thought, don't worry about it. But that was the problem. I did worry about it. I couldn't stop thinking about it, about the way his gaze had hardened when he looked at me. I had spent so long convincing myself that pregnancy wasn't ruining our marriage, that things would eventually get better. But Roland's question planted a seed of doubt that would only grow with time. I didn't know it then, but that seed had been watered by none other than Clara. She had been working behind the scenes, making Roland question everything. She had told him in so many words that she didn't think the baby was his, that maybe it was someone else's, maybe someone from the past, maybe someone closer to me than Roland had realized. She had planted those thoughts in his mind, fed him lies that made him suspicious of every moment we shared, every word I said, and every smile I tried to offer him. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone. Roland had gone out for a meeting, leaving me alone with my thoughts. That's when I received a message from Clara. It was just a simple, "How are you?" But there was something chilling in the way it was phrased. I hesitated before responding. Something inside me told me not to, but the guilt gnawed at me. I knew something wasn't right, but I couldn't put it together. What was Clara really doing? Why was she so there for Roland now? Offering advice, checking in on our marriage, as if she had a right to be part of it. After some hesitation, I decided to reach out to her, to confront her. I needed answers. I texted her, "Clara, are you telling Roland things? About me? About the baby?" My fingers shook as I typed the words, but I didn't hesitate to press send. The reply came quickly, almost too quickly. "Lina, I just want to make sure everything's okay. You know Roland and I go way back. I'm just worried about you, girl. Don't worry about anything." I stared at the screen. My mind swirled with the meaning behind her words. The last part, the "don't worry about anything," felt like a warning. She was trying to convince me that everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. My heart raced as I sat there, feeling the weight of Roland's distant attitude, Clara's manipulations, and my own growing sense of betrayal. What had I missed? What was really going on behind my back? The more I thought about it, the more I began to realize the truth. Roland's distance wasn't just from the pregnancy. It was from the lies Clara had been telling him, feeding him rumors about my supposed infidelity. Roland wasn't acting this way because of me. It was Clara. It was her. She had been whispering doubts into Roland's ears, making him second-guess me, making him question everything we had. But what could I do? I was pregnant, emotionally drained, and trying to hold on to a relationship that felt like it was slipping through my fingers. The man I loved didn't trust me anymore, and it was all because of Clara's poison. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The distance between Roland and me had grown wider, more palpable, with each passing day. It wasn't just the way he looked at me anymore, or the absence of his touch, though those were significant. It was the coldness in his eyes, the empty spaces in our conversations, the silence where once there had been laughter and shared thoughts. And I knew deep down that Clara was behind it all. But what could I do? She had woven herself into our lives, into our relationship. And now I was struggling to find a way to untangle the threads. Roland's questions had begun to eat at me, gnawing at the edges of my confidence. How sure am I that the baby is his? Did I really think he couldn't tell? Could I be carrying someone else's child? His silence after those questions echoed in my mind for days. I tried to bury it. I tried to focus on the baby, on the future that I knew was coming. But with every day, it felt like Roland was slipping further away from me. One night, I decided I needed to confront him. I had spent too many nights staring at the ceiling, alone in our bed, my stomach swollen with our child, yet my heart feeling emptier than I'd ever felt before. So I waited for him to come home. I put on my favorite dress, one he used to adore, and I prepared myself for the hardest conversation of my life. He came through the door around 9 p.m., looking tired and stressed from his day. His usual greeting was a kiss to my forehead, a smile that never quite reached his eyes. But tonight, I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine when nothing felt fine anymore. "Roland," I said, my voice shaky but firm, "we need to talk." He looked up from his phone, surprise flickering across his face, but he didn't say anything. He just dropped his bag by the door and walked over to the couch, sitting down with a tired sigh. I stood in front of him, my hands clenched at my sides, taking in the space between us. "About what?" he asked, his tone distant, guarded. "About Clara," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "About the things she's been saying to you." He froze, his eyes darkening, and for a moment I could see something, regret, guilt, maybe even fear, pass over his face. But then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a look of indifference that hurt more than I could explain. "Clara?" His voice was carefully neutral, as if he had no idea what I was talking about. "Don't act like you don't know," I snapped, the frustration I had been holding back finally spilling over. "She's been planting doubts in your head. You've been acting different, Roland. You've been pulling away from me, and I know it's because of her." He stared at me for a long time, his jaw clenched tight. And then, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "Lina, it's not what you think." His voice was quiet, almost apologetic, but the words didn't bring me any comfort. "Then explain it to me," I demanded, stepping closer. "Because I don't understand. You don't touch me anymore. You barely look at me. And now I overhear you questioning if the baby is even mine? Roland, what's happening to us?" For a moment, he didn't answer. His gaze fell to the floor, and I saw him struggle with the weight of the words that had been hanging between us for so long. Finally, he exhaled sharply and looked up at me. "I don't know how to say this, but—" He paused, seemingly trying to find the right words. "Clara's right, Lina. I've been thinking about it. She's just been honest with me. You've changed, and I feel like I've lost you." His words hit me like a punch to the chest. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Clara had been feeding him lies. Lies that made him believe I wasn't the woman he married anymore. And now he was believing them. "How could you believe her?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "She's been lying to you, Roland. You know her. You've known her longer than I have. She wants what we have, and now she's trying to tear us apart." Roland stood up abruptly, walking to the window as if he couldn't face me any longer. "I don't know anymore, Lina. You've been so distant, and I'm scared. I feel like I'm losing you, and maybe I just—" "Roland, stop!" I cried out, rushing toward him, my hands grabbing his arms, pulling him around to face me. "I'm still here. I've always been here. But you're pushing me away, and I don't know what else to do. I'm pregnant, Roland. I'm carrying our child, and I need you now more than ever." He closed his eyes, his chest rising and falling with every breath, his face filled with conflict and uncertainty. "I don't know how to handle this, Lina. I don't know how to deal with all of this. Pregnancy, the changes, you. You're not the same anymore, and neither am I." Tears started to fill my eyes, and I took a step back, trying to hold on to my composure. "I know I've changed, but I didn't change because of the baby. I changed because of you, because of the way you've treated me. You've been distant, Roland. You've shut me out, and it's killing me." He reached out, touching my face gently, his eyes full of sorrow. "I don't want to hurt you, Lina. I don't know what to do with all of this. I'm scared. I'm scared I'll lose you. I'm scared that we've changed and we can't go back." I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing, my heart breaking. Roland had been slipping away from me, but it wasn't just him. It was me too. I had been withdrawing, holding back, because I didn't know how to fix us, how to fix what Clara had done. I took his hand, holding it to my chest, trying to show him the truth in my heart. "I'm still the woman you married, Roland. I may be pregnant, but I'm still me. I need you to believe that." His face softened, but the doubt still lingered in his eyes. "I want to believe it," he whispered. "I really do. But the damage had already been done. The trust was gone, and it wasn't just Clara who had shaken it. It was us too. The distance between us had grown, and I didn't know how to bridge it anymore." The night air felt heavy around me as I sat in the car, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Roland's words echoed in my ears, a cruel reminder of everything I feared. "I need you to leave, Lina." It felt surreal. The man I loved, the man who had promised to cherish me, to protect me, was now telling me to leave. I couldn't understand it. My heart was still tangled in the sweet memories of our love, and yet all of that seemed to evaporate in an instant. I looked down at my stomach, the life growing inside me, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. How could he do this to us? I didn't cry immediately after leaving the mansion, and that was what shocked me the most. I expected tears, screaming, maybe even collapsing at the gate. But instead, I drove like a ghost, my hands stiff on the steering wheel, my body moving like my mind wasn't even inside me anymore. The streetlights blurred in front of my eyes, and my chest felt tight like someone had wrapped a rope around my heart and kept pulling. And the strangest part was that my stomach tightened too. Not from hunger, but from the baby. My unborn child reacted. Even the baby felt the rejection. It was like my body was screaming the truth that my own mind still refused to accept. Roland didn't just change. He made a decision about me, and that decision didn't include mercy. As I drove deeper into the night, it hit me harder and harder that Roland believed her. He believed Clara, our so-called close friend, more than he believed me, his own wife. The betrayal wasn't only in the fact that he kicked me out, it was in the fact that he chose another voice over mine without even giving me a chance to defend myself. That kind of pain is not the kind you recover from quickly. It's the kind that rewrites the way you look at love forever. I swallowed hard when my eyes started burning again, forcing myself not to vomit from the mixture of pregnancy nausea and heartbreak. Roland used to kiss my forehead like I was his piece. How could that same man look at my belly and still tell me to leave? How could the man who promised to protect me become the one I needed protection from? I pulled into the nearest hotel I could find. Not even a luxury one, just a simple building with bright, harsh lights, like the kind of place people go when they have nowhere else to turn. I stepped out of the car holding my stomach instinctively, like my hands could shield my baby from the world. My heels clicked loudly on the pavement, and I suddenly felt ridiculous, because I wasn't dressed like a woman who had been thrown out. I was dressed like a billionaire's wife, designer dress, expensive purse, jewelry that sparkled under the lights. Yet there I was, shaking, abandoned, pregnant, looking like a rich woman in a movie who just got discarded in one scene and expected to survive the next. When I entered the hotel lobby, the receptionist's eyes dropped to my belly, then returned to my face. She didn't ask questions, but I still felt exposed. People don't look at a crying pregnant woman at night and assume betrayal. They assume shame. I forced out a small smile and asked for a room, my voice barely holding together. She handed me a keycard with a neutral face, but her silence still felt loud. When I got into the room and the door clicked shut behind me, the strength I'd been using to survive collapsed. My knees gave way and I slid down the door slowly, my back against the wood, my hands on my belly. And then I cried. Not the quiet tears that fall politely. I cried like someone dying inside, like my heart had been torn open, like the life I thought I had was being buried while I was still breathing. I held my stomach and whispered to my baby that I was sorry, that I tried, that I didn't know how it all went so wrong so fast. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a throat that burned from crying. My back ached in that deep pregnancy way, the one that reminds you you're not carrying only pain. You're carrying life too. I went to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror, and for the first time, I didn't recognize my own face. My cheeks looked fuller, my eyes looked tired, my lips were dry, my hair was messy, and my belly was undeniable. There was no hiding it. It wasn't just the pregnancy showing. It was the fact that my life had changed permanently overnight. The baby was coming soon, and reality whispered cruel questions into my mind. Where would I go when I went into labor? Who would drive me to the hospital? Who would hold my hand when the pain became unbearable? Who would sign the papers? Who would stand beside me when I was bringing his child into the world? I gripped the sink as my body began to shake. I whispered to God that I couldn't do this alone, but even that prayer felt like it was bouncing off walls that didn't care. Days passed and Roland didn't call. Not once, no checkup, no message, no apology, no "are you okay?" Nothing. That silence was more painful than insults, because silence is not neutral. Silence is a decision, and Roland's silence told me something I never wanted to accept, that he didn't care what happened to me outside his gate. I tried distracting myself by ordering food, but I couldn't eat. I tried watching TV, but every sound irritated me. I tried sleeping, but my mind replayed his face over and over, cold, hard, detached, like the Roland I knew had died with my happiness. Then humiliation came, the kind that makes your stomach twist. By the second or third day, my card declined at the hotel restaurant. Not because I was poor, because Roland controlled everything. The accounts, the access, the cards, even the allowances. Everything ran through systems he owned. The waiter stood there looking at me politely, but his voice still sounded like judgment when he said it declined. I laughed nervously and told him maybe it was network. He tried again and it declined again. I could feel people watching. I wanted the ground to swallow me. I stood up quickly, mumbling something and walking away before tears could fall. In my room, I sat on the bed shaking, staring at my phone like it might suddenly light up with Roland's name and the words, "I'm sorry," but it didn't. And that was when I realized that this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was punishment. Roland didn't just want me gone. He wanted me to feel it. That night, my baby kicked hard. The movement startled me, like a tiny reminder that I couldn't fall apart completely, even if I wanted to. I pressed my palm against my belly and whispered to my child, trying to hold my tears back, telling the baby that his father wasn't a bad man, that maybe he was just confused. But even as I said it, the words tasted like lies, because men don't get confused and throw their pregnant wives away. Men who truly love you don't do that. The truth hurt, but it was real. I was alone. I was pregnant. And I had been rejected by the man whose child I carried. On the fourth day, Roland finally sent a message. My heart jumped when I saw his name, because no matter how angry I was, a part of me still wanted him to choose me. But when I opened the message, my whole body went numb. It wasn't concern, it wasn't remorse. It was one line: "We need to do a DNA test as soon as possible." That was it. No greeting, no Lina, no how are you, just DNA. I stared at the screen, rereading it like maybe my eyes were wrong. I felt something cold slide into my chest. In that one sentence, I realized what I had become to him. Not his wife, not the woman he promised forever, not the mother of his child. I had become a suspect. My fingers trembled as I typed back one word: "Fine." Then I threw the phone on the bed like it had burned me. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again and wiped my face slowly. I lifted my chin and spoke to myself like I was speaking to someone I loved. I told Lina, myself, that if Roland wanted to treat me like I was disposable, then he didn't deserve my softness anymore. I placed my hand on my belly and promised my baby that we would survive, even if it killed me emotionally. Because at that moment, I understood something clearly. Roland had already chosen his side, and it wasn't mine. I didn't expect Roland to show up. Not after the message, not after the silence, not after the way he treated me like I was guilty without proof. In my mind, I had already accepted that the man I married was gone, replaced by a stranger wearing the same face. So when I heard loud knocks on my hotel door that evening, I assumed it was room service, or maybe the receptionist coming to ask about the unpaid bills again. I opened the door without thinking, and my entire body froze. Roland stood there, not in his usual perfect billionaire composure, not in his polished, cold aura that made the world bow around him. He stood there like a man who hadn't slept. His shirt wasn't properly tucked. His hair looked slightly disorganized, like he'd run his hands through it too many times. His eyes were red, not irritated red, crying red, the kind of red that happens when tears have been fighting their way out for hours. And for a second, I couldn't breathe because the sight of him triggered every emotion inside me at once: love, anger, longing, pain, and humiliation. I stared at him like I was seeing a ghost, because the last time I saw this man, he threw me out of my home like I was trash. Now he was standing here in front of my hotel room like a lost boy who didn't know where else to go. "Lina," he whispered. Just hearing my name from his mouth made my throat tighten. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair that he could break me and still call my name like I belonged to him. My hand slowly gripped the door, ready to slam it in his face. I wanted to. I wanted to so badly, but my body didn't move. I stood there frozen in my hurt, in my shock, in the storm of emotions he had left behind. Roland swallowed hard, his jaw tightening like he was struggling to keep himself together. His eyes moved to my belly, and the moment he saw it clearly, the way it had grown, the way it sat high and heavy, his face changed. His lips parted like he wanted to say something but couldn't. His shoulders dropped slightly, And for the first time, I saw fear in him. Not fear of business, not fear of losing money, fear of losing me. My God, he breathed out, like the sight of my pregnancy outside his home finally slapped him awake. You're really here. I wanted to laugh at that statement because it was almost insulting, as if I was supposed to disappear after he kicked me out, as if a woman carrying life could just evaporate into thin air. What do you want, Roland? I asked finally, my voice sharp, cold, trembling from the effort it took to even speak. Why are you here? His eyes flickered. He looked down briefly like a man ashamed of his own actions. Then he looked back at me, and when I saw tears gather in his eyes again, my heart did something stupid. It softened for a second, then hardened twice as much. I made a mistake, he said. I blinked. That was it? That was his grand apology? I let out a bitter smile that didn't reach my eyes. You didn't make a mistake, Roland. You made a decision. He shook his head quickly like my words were knives. No, Lina, I swear. I wasn't thinking straight. I stepped back from the door slightly, still keeping my distance. My heart was pounding so hard it made me feel dizzy. You weren't thinking straight when you threw your pregnant wife out at night? I asked, my voice rising. You weren't thinking straight when you ignored me for days? I took a shaky breath. You weren't thinking straight when your people blocked my card and left me to struggle like a nobody? Roland's face twisted with pain. I didn't know that happened, he whispered. That statement almost broke me because it showed me just how powerful he was and how careless that power could be. Even if he didn't personally order it, the system moved with his anger. The empire punished me because its king was offended, and I was the woman who had to bleed for it. You didn't know, I repeated slowly, tasting the bitterness of those words. Of course you didn't. You didn't even care enough to check if I was alive. Roland tried to speak again, but his voice cracked. He stared at me like I was the only thing holding him up. And then, he did something I never expected. He dropped to his knees, right there, in the hallway of the hotel. A billionaire on his knees. My breath caught in my chest so sharply it felt like pain. I watched him like my brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. He looked up at me with tears spilling freely now. The kind of tears that weren't controlled or stylish. They were messy, desperate, real. I'm sorry, he whispered again. This time like his soul was begging. Lina, I'm sorry. I was angry. I was stupid. I let poison enter my head, and I believed it like a fool. My fingers tightened around the doorframe. Poison? I whispered. He nodded, wiping his face like he hated himself for crying. Clara, he confessed, voice broken. It was Clara. My entire body went cold. Clara, the close friend, the woman who hugged me, called me sister, touched my belly, prayed for my child, smiled at me like she loved me. She came to me, Roland continued, voice heavy, and she told me the baby wasn't mine. She said she knew things. She said you had someone else. She said, he choked on his words. She said you were using me. I stared at him in disbelief. The rage that rose inside me was so intense I felt heat behind my eyes. You believed her? I snapped, my voice shaking the hallway. You believed her over me? Roland flinched like he deserved the slap my words delivered. I know, he whispered. I know I was wrong. I know I was weak. But Lina, I panicked. I didn't know what to do with the thought. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I saw was red. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. So you punished me? Roland cried harder. Yes, he admitted. I punished you for something you never did. And I hate myself for it. I hate myself, Lina. Silence swallowed us for a moment. My whole body was trembling now. Tears filled my eyes, but I refused to let them fall because it felt like giving him the satisfaction of knowing he still had power over my emotions. Roland held my gaze like he was begging me to save him. I found out today, he said suddenly. I found out Clara lied. My eyes narrowed. How? He swallowed. I checked her messages. I don't even know why. Something in my spirit refused to settle. She was too confident, too happy, so I checked. His voice cracked again. And I found everything. Lina, she was planning it. She's been planning it. My stomach churned. My hand instinctively moved to my belly, as if I was protecting my child from even hearing this. Roland's voice dropped to a whisper. "She wanted you gone," he admitted. "She wanted me to herself." My throat tightened so badly I thought I might choke. The betrayal was unbearable. But the worst betrayal wasn't even Clara's. It was Roland's, because Clara was an outsider. Roland was my husband, the one person who was supposed to defend me when the world accused me, and he failed. Roland reached for my hand carefully, slowly, like he was afraid I'd disappear. "Please," he begged. "Please, Lina. I'm sorry, I was blind, I was foolish. But I'm here now. I'm here to bring you home. Home." That word made something inside me crack, because home was supposed to be the safest place on earth. But Roland made my home the most dangerous place for my heart. I pulled my hand away. Roland froze. His face collapsed. "I can't," I whispered. His eyes widened. "Lina, I can't just come back," I said through tears now, my voice breaking. "Do you understand what you did to me? I slept on cold sheets for days with no husband beside me. I cried till I couldn't breathe. I begged God not to let me lose the baby, because stress was choking my body. You broke me, Roland. You broke me at my weakest moment." Roland's sobs grew heavier. He pressed his forehead to the floor like a defeated man. "I know," he whispered. "I know, and I swear to God, I will spend the rest of my life making it right." I stared at him, trembling, and as much as I hated it, as much as pain screamed inside me, heart still remembered the man I married. But that night, I understood something important. Love doesn't disappear easily, but trust dies quickly. Roland looked up again, tears shining on his face. "Just let me in," he whispered. "Let me hold you. Let me apologize properly. Let me see my child, please." My throat tightened. My hand rested on my belly again, and my baby kicked softly, like the baby was reminding me there was a life involved now, not just my heart. I stepped back slowly, and for the first time since everything fell apart, I made a choice, not to forgive him immediately, not to run back into his arms, but to let him start proving himself. I opened the door wider. Roland looked up in shock, and then he crawled to his feet slowly, stepping inside like a man entering holy ground. Like he knew this moment was not a victory, but a second chance he didn't deserve. As the door closed behind him, Roland looked at me like his whole life was hanging by a thread. And maybe it was because this time, I wasn't the Lina who would accept sweet words. This time, I needed truth. I needed change. And above all, I needed him to understand that a woman can love you deeply and still refuse to be broken again. It had been a few days since Roland kicked me out. I hadn't seen him. No calls, no messages, just silence. The world outside was quiet, but my mind was a storm of confusion, hurt, and anger. I never thought Roland would do something like this to me. I never imagined our life, the life I dreamed of, would turn into this. Just a fraction of what it had been before. I wasn't just angry at him anymore. I was angry at myself for trusting the wrong people, for letting someone like Karen get in my head, for believing she had my best interests at heart. But she didn't. She wanted Roland. She wanted everything that I had, and she used my love for him against me. My phone buzzed on the small coffee table in front of me. I picked it up without thinking, seeing Roland's name light up the screen. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready for the flood of emotions his voice would bring. Instead, I stared at the message. "Can we talk?" I wanted to scream at him, to tell him to leave me alone. But a small part of me, the part that still loved him deeply, wanted to hear him out. I had always believed in the strength of our love, and this pain was almost unbearable. I didn't want him to leave forever. I didn't want to lose him. After a few minutes, I unlocked the phone, my fingers shaking as I typed a simple reply. "Where are you?" Seconds passed, then the reply came. "I'm outside. Please, Lina, let's talk." I didn't hesitate. I opened the door, my heart pounding, and there he was, standing in front of me like the man I fell in love with all over again. But something in his eyes had changed. They were filled with regret, guilt, maybe even sorrow. I didn't know what it was, but I could see that he wasn't the same man who had kicked me out just days ago. "Lina, I've made a huge mistake," he said, his voice hoarse. "Can we just talk, please?" I took a deep breath. Talk about what, Roland? Talk about how you kicked me out when I needed you the most? Or talk about how I've spent the last few days crying my heart out, alone? I wasn't thinking straight. I was angry, and I let everything get the best of me, he said, taking a step toward me. I'm sorry, Lina. I should have trusted you. I should have been there for you. I looked at him, and for the first time in days, I let myself feel the love I had once felt for him. It was still there, buried beneath the hurt, the doubt. Why did you believe her, Roland? Why did you listen to all the lies? I didn't want to, Lina. I've always loved you, and I was scared. I was scared of losing everything, and I let my own fear cloud my judgment. But I can't lose you. I can't live with myself knowing I've hurt you this way. I felt the flood of emotions threaten to overwhelm me. His words, the look in his eyes, it all felt like too much. My voice faltered. I don't know if I can forgive you, Roland. He dropped his head in shame. I understand, but I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I'll work for your forgiveness. Just please, don't shut me out. I didn't know what to say. I was torn between the woman I was before the heartbreak and the woman I had become after the pain. But Roland was still my husband, the father of my child, the man I loved. And maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other. The days after our conversation in the cafe passed in a blur of tentative steps, small but significant changes. It wasn't easy to get back to the way things were. It couldn't be. The hurt from the past weeks was still fresh, and the emptiness from Roland's absence in our lives was a wound we had to heal together. But each day we worked toward it. I started to see the glimmer of the man I had married, the man I had once loved so deeply. We went to therapy together and separately. Roland made the effort to be home more, showing up for the little things, making me breakfast, asking how I felt, taking me to my doctor's appointments. He listened, really listened, when I told him how I felt. He acknowledged that he had hurt me, that his actions had made me question our love and the future we had built. But healing wasn't just about the grand gestures. It was about the quiet moments, too. It was the way Roland started holding my hand as we sat on the couch, the way his fingers would brush against mine whenever we walked together. It was the way he looked at me now, not with distance, but with longing. The way his gaze would linger, like he was rediscovering me, learning how to love me again. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, the desperation to make things right, and it moved me in a way that was hard to explain. Roland had been my everything, even when we were apart, even when I was angry with him. A part of me still loved him fiercely. And in those moments when our hands touched, when his lips found mine, I knew deep down that we were both fighting for something that was worth saving. The first time we kissed again after everything had happened was slow, tentative. Neither of us was rushing, afraid of breaking something we hadn't fully fixed yet. But it was a kiss that meant something. It was a promise that we weren't giving up on each other no matter how many mistakes we had made. That love, real love, would always be worth fighting for. I remember the feeling of Roland's lips on mine, how it felt like the first time again, like we were learning each other in a new way, a deeper way. There was no hesitation this time, no distance between us, only a shared understanding that we both wanted to be there for each other, that despite everything, we had come back to each other with open hearts. Things weren't perfect, not by a long shot. We still had work to do. I still had my fears, my insecurities, but they didn't control me anymore. Roland didn't just show up for me in the big moments. He was there for the small ones too. He was there for me when I needed him most, when I felt overwhelmed by the weight of the pregnancy and everything it brought with it. We started to rebuild our intimacy, not just physically but emotionally. I could feel it in the way Roland looked at me when I spoke about our child. He wasn't distant anymore, like he had been before. Now he looked at me with admiration, with love. There was no longer a wall between us. There was only us, working together towards something beautiful, the future we had once dreamed of, but now with the understanding that it would take effort to keep it alive. One evening, after a quiet dinner at home, Roland turned to me as I rested my head on his shoulder, his hand resting lightly on my swollen belly. "I'm sorry for everything, Lina," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know how much I had hurt you until you told me. And now, I just want to be the husband you deserve. the father you deserve." Tears welled in my eyes as I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in weeks. There was something different in his eyes, not just guilt or regret, but something deeper, a promise. "I know, Roland," I whispered, "and I just want you to be here, with me, with us." He nodded, his gaze softening as he leaned down to kiss me again, this time with more tenderness than I had ever felt before. It wasn't just about the passion or the physical act of love. It was about connection, about two people who had been lost and were now finding their way back to each other. It wasn't easy. There were days when the weight of everything still felt too much, but we made it work. We kept talking, kept sharing, and kept showing up for each other, no matter how hard it got. And slowly we began to heal, piece by piece, day by day. When our baby was born, it was a moment of pure joy, a new beginning for us both. The challenges we had faced together had made us stronger, closer. We were no longer two people living parallel lives, but a family, bound by love, by shared experiences, and by the knowledge that no matter what happened, we would always fight for each other. And as I held our baby in my arms, looking up at Roland, I realized something profound. We hadn't just survived, we had thrived. Love wasn't just about passion or perfection. It was about partnership, about facing the hardest moments together and coming out stronger on the other side. Our journey wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And in that moment, surrounded by the life we had built, I knew that we had finally found the strength to face whatever came next, together.